The Economic Affairs Minister responds to the Bahamas Petroleum Dealers Association claims the National Insurance Board may be in hot water soon, and the Works Minister on squatting. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tyler Simonet with your Jcn News for this Tuesday, April 12th. Economic Affairs Minister Michael Halkitis seemingly contradicts Bahamas Petroleum Dealers Association Vice President Vasco Bastian when the minister tells reporters that the government does not benefit from rising fuel costs.
Is not benefiting from the cost of the increase in the cost of fuel because the government has a fixed tax on gasoline. For diesel, it's a combination of a fixed and what they call an ad valorem, which means it fluctuates. But for gasoline, which most individuals consume, the government's tax is fixed, and so whether the price goes up or down, the government's tax remains the same. So it's not that we're benefiting from any increase in the price of fuel.
Now, yesterday, Mr. Bastian told our news team that the association was considering a possible strike this upcoming long holiday weekend. He added that due to the rising price of crude oil because of the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, a heavy burden has been placed on fuel providers here in the country. Minister Halkitis notes that we all lament the increase in the price of fuel brought on by external circumstances. Additionally, he says he intends to meet with the Petroleum Dealers Association tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow, Wednesday, in the afternoon, they wrote us a letter requesting a meeting. They laid out some of the difficulties that they are facing, and they particularly mentioned increasing bank fees, fees for cash deposits, credit card fees, increased mortgage rates, increased liability and property insurance, and some others. And they are requesting that we look at the regime that they operate under. I would say that we did not receive in that letter, any threat of strike by the Petroleum Dealers Association, so I don't, and I think they quite rightly understand that when you're communicating with the government, you do it in good faith, so we've agreed to a meeting. So there's no threat from the Petroleum Dealers Association for a strike. So maybe some element or one or two, but our communication so far with the association has not included any ultimatum whatsoever put to the government. So we'll meet with them.
Minister Halkitis adds that in this environment, seeking to increase margins will only lead to higher prices at the pump for Bahamians, something he says won't be happening at this time. The fate of the National Insurance Board looking a bit grim according to a recent review. That said, Cabinet may be looking to increase rates soon. Arlia Cooper has more.
An actuarial review of the National Insurance Board predicts that the fund would be depleted by 2028 unless urgent steps are taken. This coming from Minister responsible for NIB, Miles Larota, this morning ahead of the weekly cabinet meeting. This, according to Minister Larota, is the 11th review of its kind.
Sure. The 11th actuarial report of the ILO basically said unless urgent steps are taken, that the fund will be depleted by 2028. The 10th actuarial report stated that if corrective measures were not taken urgently, that it would have been depleted in 2029. And so between the 10th and the 11th, the process was expedited by a year. And so here we are.
Minister Larota also spoke to the current size of the fund.
The current size of the fund is about, I think it's around 1.6 billion. The issue isn't the current size of the fund. The issue is that contributions far outpace, benefits far outpace the contributions. In the 80s, I think the contribution was around $12 million a year, the benefits. Now, the benefit payouts are north of $100 million a year. That's just not sustainable.
Right. Would you say the strain of the COVID-19?
He says the reality is that NIB has been running in deficit for the past 6 years, predating COVID and Hurricane Dorian. Minister LaRota says this proverbial can has been kicked down the road too many times. And since the fund was established, there has been one rate increase, and that was back in 2010 from 8.8% to 9.8%. After the report was given, he says he presented the report to his cabinet colleagues, and he assured that the government will move expeditiously to address those concerns raised. That said, Minister LaRota adds that the government's prepared to make tough decisions, even if that means a rate increase. In fact, asks if there will be a possible rate increase, he says yes.
Yes. I will temper that by saying we have not voted on that yet, but a decision is being prepared, and I will not be surprised if that happens for the mere fact that we are in this unsustainable position.
Do we know yet?
He says that increase can be anywhere from 1.5% to 2% biannually. Reporting for Jcn News, I'm Leah Cooper.
Thanks, Leah. Minister of Works and Utilities Alfred Sears speaking out on the issue of squatting, advising reporters just before the weekly cabinet meeting that his ministry, along with the Town Planning Board, are reviewing the issue to compile a report to be presented to cabinet.
With respect to any squatting on government land, that matter is now being reviewed. I spoke with the chairman of the Town Planning Board, Mr. Johnson, and I know they are reviewing it. Also, the building control unit of the Ministry of Works. So I should have a comprehensive report, and the report that I expect will have options and recommendation, at which time I will go to Cabinet, present a strategy, and we will then implement.
Now, under the previous administration, a number of illegal housing structures were demolished, most notably on the farm Shantytown on Abaco. When asked if he has been receiving reports of those Shantytown residents rebuilding on the property, Minister Sears says this.
I've not received reports, but my eyes are open. I was in Abaco 3 weeks ago for the commissioning of the Little Abaco Bridge. And as I was driving from the airport, I was told that there are certain communities which, subsequent to Hurricane Dorian, have been established. Upon returning to Nassau, asked the town planning and also the building control to investigate the reports that I had received. And I expect that those reports will be forthcoming.
Minister Sears notes that contacts of the report will have to address what the previous administration has done and see how the Davis administration can address the challenge of the human displacement in Abaco. He says that thousands of people who were displaced in Abaco, many of whom are still living in domes that were not meant for long-term stay, and the government is making ways to address this issue. Ground is expected to be broken soon for a new state-of-the-art high-medium prison facilities on the grounds of the Bahamas Department of Corrections, and it could be anywhere between late 2022 and early 2023. National Security Minister Wayne Munro telling reporters as much on the sidelines of an empowerment seminar for staff members of the facility. The minister says the project is estimated to cost in the region of $45 million and will cover renewable energy sources such as solar panels, as it's the government's policy to now use renewable energy.
And so the starting point is that we're looking at building, as he said, a 700-bed high-medium prison. There'll be steel fabricated, so there'll be no place to dig and hide contraband, no place to dig and hide phones. It'll be more controlled. It'll be modern so that you can have it surveilled by cameras and to cut down on contraband, to cut down on the ability for people to communicate with the outside uncontrolled.
Now here's what the Freetown Member of Parliament had to say on what BDOC's officials are doing to ensure that inmates' mental health needs are being addressed to ensure that they can become productive members of society once released.
I've received requests from Commissioner Clare for us to hire, I think it's 2 psychiatrists, psychologists, and a child mental health expert. We also are aggressively, as the Prime Minister indicated, funding the training of prison officers. We are not certified as a correctional institution because you have to have certified correctional officers to be certified as a correctional institution. We intend to address and correct that.
The minister also updating the press on what works prison inmates are currently doing around the compound.
It's still being used to do tasks. So for instance, we are renovating the chaplain's residence, the commissioner's residence for use by the people from Corrections Canada for saving. That's being done by prison labor. There's a part of the prison that was privately contracted in the previous administration. The work just isn't up to par. It's being corrected by prison labor, directed by the overseers, the correctional officers.
Now, the minister could not say if inmates will be used on the new project at this time. Minister Munro also spoke to the manpower shortage at BDOCs and says that they are in the last stages of the vetting process of some 100 potential recruits. Around the world, particularly in the sporting communities, the study and impact of brain and spinal injuries have been the focus of much attention. However, in the Bahamas and the Caribbean, treatment and knowledge of such injuries have not gotten the attention that they deserve. That is, until now. Bahamian neurosurgeon Myron Roll has begun a regional movement that will empower those in the medical field with the knowledge and tools to treat such injuries. And as we hear in this next report by Dorino Saunders, that includes nurses.
Bahamian neurosurgeon, Rhodes Scholar, and former NFL player Dr. Myron Roll continues his push to fill the voids that exist when recognizing and treating neurotrauma like concussions and severe brain and spine injuries. Following a concussion symposium in conjunction with the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture last month, on Tuesday, Dr. Roll began a Neurotrauma Workshop for Caribbean nurses. His first stop here in the capital, with close to 100 nurses from New Providence and the Family Islands conducting the workshop at the Holy Trinity Activity Center. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Michael Dovell says the workshop is much needed and can potentially save many lives.
This morning I'm delighted to be here at this Neurotrauma Workshop for Caribbean nurses. I'm even more delighted to know that hundreds of nurses here in New Providence and Grand Bahama will be trained on how to improve the immediate care delivered to patients presented with traumatic brain injury. As a physician, I've seen it. I've worked in the emergency room. I've seen it at sites of accidents where our emergency medical service would come, not really paying close attention to what's happening with the patient, and as a direct result, poor care at the site create more long-term injury. And so this particular workshop, I believe, will prove to be beneficial for our nurses and also beneficial to the delivery of healthcare systems throughout our archipelago.
Dr. Roll, who is a resident neurosurgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston and also the founder of the Caribbean Neurosurgery Foundation, CNF, spoke to how critical early and proper neurotrauma care can be to saving lives and the quality of life for survivors. He adds that it is important to fill this medical gap throughout the Caribbean.
I said when I became a neurosurgeon, when I had the networks, when I had the belief of people like Dr. Magnus and Dr. Darville and others to do more and to try to fix this gap or fill this void with training, with policy, with education, with advancement in care, then I would do that. As Dr. McMillan made mention to, there's a golden hour, there's a golden window to treat these patients with head and spine trauma. You learn about it today. And if you fall outside of that 4-hour window, then patients either die or become permanently disabled. And so my foundation is trying to push that ahead. It's fitting to come home and do it here first, and then we'll advance it to the other CARICOM member states.
Meanwhile, Minister of Health Dr. Michael Dovell praised Bahamian nurses and thanked them for their commitment to the country. He encourages them to soak up as much knowledge as they can from the symposium because it can only help to enhance their career.
I want to commend all of our nurses because you're some of the best nurses in the world. Give it up for yourself. I say that and I really mean it. You're so good that everyone around the world is recruiting you. My job is to try to keep you at home, and so my work is becoming more difficult as we speak, but I do appreciate the work that you do for our people and your commitment to quality service despite the challenges that we currently face in our healthcare system. But this morning I'm delighted to be here to know that hundreds of nurses here in New Providence and Grand Bahama will be trained on how to improve the immediate care delivered to patients presented with traumatic brain injury.
On behalf of the Prime Minister, Dr. Darville thanked Dr. Roll for his vision and dedication to the Bahamas. Dr. Roll and his team are expected to host the symposium on Grand Bahama on Wednesday at the Pelican Bay Hotel from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. before stops in several CARICOM nations. Jurino Saunders, Jcn News.
Thanks, Jurino. You're watching Jcn News. Stay with us.